Hi, my name is Jay Oliva. I'm the director of The Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and 2, and I will be doing a little bit of commentary here. The one thing that as a director and as a storyboard artist, we work on script analysis. You know, the writer will never write out a whole action sequence beat for beat. Basically, the screenplay will be kind of the idea as well as the dialogue. As a director and as a storyboard artist, we then have to take the script and try to figure out what the spirit of the script is. So a lot of times I have to think about what he wrote, you know, what the screenplay has, look at what Frank Miller had done in that one panel or those two panels, and then really try to figure out what was the intention of both the screenplay and Frank's intention and extrapolate from that. So this is the introduction of Superman. Just like in the comic book, we start off on the White House and we have the kind of crazy looking guards that Frank Miller has outside the White House. Slowly push in through the gate, and because we can't really do what, how the comic is, which is, start on the flag and then have the flag slowly morph into a Superman S, it works in graphic novel, but unfortunately, on film, it's kind of hard to do that without having to get too artsy with it. I mean, there's a lot of things I did artsy in some of the other sequences, but this is one of those things where I think the spirit of the scene, when you look at the panels with the comic and the pacing, is that keep the audience guessing of who he's talking to. I purposely kept the camera as a neutral shot and slowly, build it up so that the audience doesn't know who he's talking to. It's almost like, is he addressing the audience? I mean, is he addressing to the public, or who is he addressing to? But as this camera slowly pulls out, as we can see here.
I understand, sir.
Now, I'm not asking you to put him down. Not yet, anyway. But settle him.
It's the reveal of Superman, and I wanted to time it so that when we get the good boy, or I forgot how it is, but we end on the Superman S.
Things to get out of hand. You know how to get in touch with him, don't you, son?
He's not hard to find, sir.
Good boy.
And then this is Superman's POV of him flying over Gotham. And then that we do a hard cut to the, down on street level, police siren goes by, unknowing that the liquor store that it passes is being robbed. And here we see Rob and Dawn back, but now in their Bruno-type outfits as opposed to being the mutants from Part 1. I just wanted to point out that this section was storyboarded by Adam Van Wyck, and Adam's one of a very amazing storyboard artist, and I've worked with him over the years on quite a few of my films, and he's a huge comic book fan, and when I told him he had the sequence, he was very excited. So he did actually all this stuff as well, all the way through the Bruno sequence that we see coming up. So, here we've got, if you notice that I made sure that the guns matched the comic as well. There were a lot of things that I wanted to make sure that still felt like the comic and was still true to the spirit of it, and to still keep it within the kind of 80s time that I wanted to make sure that, it fit. Just like the movie Watchmen, they try to give it this alternate 80s futuristic view. The same thing I wanted to do with The Dark Knight Returns, is that it still has to feel like it was an 80s film, but not necessarily set in the 80s. So here we have the introduction of Batman as the bag lady, or the homeless person, and there's actually a lot of challenges in designing her, because in the comic you only see her in a few kind of shots, and one of the things that we had to try to accomplish is that whether or not our Bruce Wayne would fit inside that fat lady suit, so to speak. And we went through a lot of discussions between Bruce and I and John, who was the character designer, and we came up with this kind of happy compromise where we were able to actually fit our Bruce Wayne, which where he's kind of hunched down, to fit inside this disguise. So this fight sequence is something that where I wanted to make it feel more brutal. There's not very much martial arts. It's just really like, neo-Nazi beatdown where they're trying to kick him, and it's much more kind of much more violent and not very finesse at all, because it's it's a fight inside of a liquor store. And I wanted to do a lot of moves where there's a headbutt, just a lot of just haymaker punches. We kept the scene where, I can't remember if that's Robert Don, but he gets picked up by the belt and gets thrown into the the wine bottles. And so these are all scenes from the comic. And whenever we could, grab a panel from the comic, we went for it.
Pull that trigger, and I'll be back for you. Pull that trigger, and I'll be back for you.
And so we cut to here. What I wanted is intercut from Batman to Superman's POV. So what's happening is that I wanted to echo Batman's kind of last line. I mean, this wasn't something that was in the script, at least I don't remember, but I wanted to kind of bring attention to the fact that Superman's still searching for Batman. And when he hears it using his super hearing, he kind of pinpoints it. And what we're going to do is we're going to cross-cut this sequence where Bruno is chasing Robin, and then the fight with Batman to Superman basically pinpointing to where Batman is, so that when he finally shows up, it's this really great reveal. So this is Carrie Kelly doing her Robin. The one thing that you'll probably notice that I kind of changed a little bit from the comic, I think the comic, the time that has passed from the second graphic novel to the third one is that I think there's only supposed to be maybe a few weeks that pass. When we were doing this initially, I realized that I needed to have some time pass, because I wanted Carrie Kelly to be more trained than she was in the original. And so I just came up with this idea that, you know what, I really want to set this in like November, late November of in Gotham. So it's not really quite super cold, but it's not like the hot of the summer that it was in part one. And so that way, kind of freed us so that I can explain why Carrie Kelly Robin is a lot more trained. They're working more as a team, and also it explains why Batman's arm isn't broken anymore. So here's the scene with Bruno. In the comic, I don't remember if it exactly followed it this way. I knew that I needed to end it in the sewers. So I had this idea that, she goes into this abandoned building thinking that she's going to find Robin and then find a way for her grenade to blow up the floor and have her fall through. Here's a sequence where we've got I call him the jerk in a suit, because he ends up showing up later in part two. And I wanted this idea of him where he's pushing his way through the crowd. He slips so that he's not that bad of a jerk, but he slips and he accidentally pushes these people over into the oncoming train. One of the pitfalls we had to do that's different than the comic was that I didn't want to make it look like Superman destroyed that train, because honestly, if he were to stop that, I think all the passengers would have died. So I really wanted to make sure, okay, well, he stopped it, and then I needed to have that shot where he kind of leans out. I mean, the people lean out to make sure that, oh, what's going on? Oh, the front of the train is crushed.
Tell me what Joker's planning. No, not him. Not now.
Okay, so here is the reveal of Superman. We want to keep him in silhouette and heavy shadow. When you watch the final footage, and I think I'll mention this later, but when the bullets hit his chest there, you'll actually see a little bit glimpses of the Superman S. And then here we've got the heat vision. And I like the idea of him blurring. I think it's kind of in the comic, but I think at that point it was never really seen visually before that. Since then, though, we've had Superman blur all the time, and that effect that we did in the movie I actually used from All-Star Superman, which I storyboarded the sequence with Parasite, and I did hit the blur there. So when they asked me, "What do you want that to look like?" I was like, "Do it what I used in All-Star," and that's what we're using here. So, here's the sequence, the end of the sequence finally, where Carrie looks down and she's, wondering, is that who she thinks it is? And we get that affirmation of Bruce kind of like grumbling to himself. One thing about animation that a lot of, animators or storyboard artists and directors do is that they use a close-up way too much. They just think, oh, a character is talking, I'm just going to do a close-up. You don't say pieces of dialogue that is just exposition on a close-up. The close-up has to be something where it has impact, it has meaning, and it basically tells the audience, hey, turn on your brain because what they're saying is very important. It basically brings relevance to that piece of dialogue. And with Miller, he wants you to know that every piece of dialogue, whenever he's a close-up, is important. And what's funny is that in film, it's the exact same way. The way I always use close-ups is that I want to do a build up to the close up. So one example of that would be like in the sequence with Batman and the Joker. So the next scene that we'll be looking at is actually probably my favorite of the movie, and also even of the book. So anyways, this sequence was storyboarded by Charles Drost, and this is the carnival sequence where basically Joker has set his plan in motion. He started World War III so that Superman is busy, and he can't stop Joker from enacting his final one last, hurrah with Batman. And here's the thing, Joker just wants to be alone with Batman. It's this kind of weird relationship. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to start where we have, lots of crowds, it's a much open area, and we will then, travel throughout the carnival to where it finally ends, where we're in like the tunnel of love in an enclosed, smaller space where it's just Batman and Joker. So all this is just set up for Joker for his final confrontation with Batman. And what I wanted to do here is I wanted to make it seem like Joker is a killer who hasn't killed in so long, and so he's got Batman there, and he wants Batman to witness all the atrocities that he can't stop him. And I think Joker, that's how he connects his biggest kind of revenge towards Batman, just to remind him that, hey, you kept me alive, by keeping me alive. You're responsible for all these deaths or all the crazy things that I've done. I'm not responsible. You're responsible. And so we that was my original intention, that I wanted to make this the end-all, be-all of all, Batman and Joker confrontations. And so here's the sequence where we have, this is Brendan Kloger, one of my storyboard artists, who actually did part of this, as well as Sam Liu. And Sam Liu is one of the directors at the DTVs, as well as a lot of our series. And I remember I had to go to Sam's office and ask him for favors in order for I could get him to work on my film. And I told him, okay, this is an awesome sequence. It's so awesome that I wanted to do it myself, but at the time I was so busy with work that I didn't have a chance to. But I had a clear idea of what I wanted. And what I wanted is what you're seeing on screen here, is that I wanted kind of an homage to the, Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee, but it's Joker in the middle, and Batman's kind of terrorizing him. And we're, and from there we go into this, this frenetic fight sequence where I just wanted to make it look like, Batman is he knows that he has to stop Joker. There's no way about it. There's no talking him to giving himself up. He's got to beat Joker senseless in order to bring him back to Gotham. And of course, Joker is gonna, try his best to not go back, because he's like, you know what? If I die, I'm gonna take you with me. And so, here's a sequence where he actually wounds Batman. And I wanted it so that he shoots at Batman, almost point blank, but it's not a great shot, so he misses, but I wanted to do the story point where he runs out of ammo. And that's one thing that, it's a big pet peeve of mine. It's guys always shoot their guns in movies, but they never run out. So I wanted to make that a story point. How do I get Joker away? Because if Joker has Batman dead to rights, like what we just saw, wouldn't he just go up and just shoot him? And so I wanted to do this thing where he sees that his gun is out of bullets, and then he kind of giggles to himself and okay, well, I've got more fun planned ahead. And I think that's what Joker is all about. So here we've got Carrie Kelly with Humpty Dumpty, and Humpty, going to his untimely death. And I think it's quite a fun little sequence there. And then, of course, we go back to Joker. And this is a scene I actually added because, because I had him run out of bullets, I had to figure out, how does he get another gun? And so I added the sequence where we just had this security guard who comes in thinking, I'm gonna stop the Joker. And I reveal Joker's knife because his knife is gonna play an important part at the end of the fight. you always have to set things up in film. You know, I always hate it when, you know, oh look, where did he get that gun? Oh, he always had it with him. Why didn't he use it earlier? So I wanted to kind of set it up to the audience that he's got a knife. So this next sequence is actually, you know, it's very gruesome, but it's one of those things like I mentioned earlier, is like I want it to look like, you know, Joker is this starving, you know, guy who is, you know, on a diet, and now he's on a all-you-can-eat buffet, and he is just going to go to town, you know, killing as much as he can indiscriminately. Because it's not because I wanted to have him kill just for the sake of killing, because I wanted to make it clear why Batman has to do what he does later. Because Joker's just not going to stop. One of the few kind of Easter egg type of things you'll notice is that, you know, we set it in the Tunnel of Love. In the comic book, it was very much more like a sewer, like a dark kind of sewer. That's how I always thought it was just a dark tunnel. In my mind, I always wanted it to have like big hearts and cherubs, angels flying around, that kind of thing, because I thought it was quite fitting that you had almost this kind of romance coming to an end between Joker and Batman in an area that looks like people should be falling in love, but you juxtapose that with the fact that it's two people trying to kill each other.
I've murdered by letting you live.
I never kept count.
I did.
I know. And I love you for it.
This is the sequence that I love the most, in the sense that when I was telling Sam Liu about this, and I remember Sam looked at me like incredulously, like, "You want what?" And I told him, I want this fight to be like as much like the comic. The one thing about the comic that I liked, I love the idea of Batman choking Joker. At the same time, Joker is shivving him, you know, and of course it's, you know, it's quite a gruesome sight. So I wanted to set this up that, you know, once Batman and Joker start to go hand to hand, you'll realize that Batman should win, you know. But I wanted to do this idea that, you know, Joker, because I wanted to, in order to even the playing field, I wanted him to have these kind of like very dexterous type of fingers or hands, and that's why Joker with a knife is quite deadly, and actually is, you know, a good kind of pair off with Batman's kind of martial arts prowess. And of course, you know, we get the big reveal here. Batman is choking Joker, and then Joker just starts stabbing him, and he's actually stabbing, if you notice, he's stabbing him in the same area that he was shot at, you know, so it's actually quite gruesome. But like I said, I wanted to make it so that Batman had no choice whatsoever. You know, he had to destroy this monster. But even then, he didn't actually kill him. He broke his neck so that he's paralyzed, but didn't kill him. You see the couple kind of run away because they think that Batman broke Joker's neck, and so they're gonna tell the cops and everybody. And then Joker, last kind of defiancy, he breaks his own neck, and knows that by the time the cops find his body, they will blame Batman for it. That's his biggest joke, is that he gets to have the last laugh.
And they'll kill you for it.
If you listen to the music, I want to give credit to Chris Drake, the composer, because I pitched this idea, and God bless him, because he ran with it and just made something amazing. So if you're really kind of astute and listen closely, it's got this kind of and it's playing in the background, and you'll hear it in this carnival sequence, and it actually goes throughout the entire sequence. As the scene progresses, when he starts talking to Batman before he breaks his own neck, well, what I wanted to do with the music-wise is that I remember telling Chris exactly these notes. I want the same but I want it slow, like dun 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 dun. But it's going slow and slower. It's almost like it's mimicking his heartbeat.
We can still end on a high note. You're in trouble now. Come on, finish me. Doesn't matter. I win. I made you lose control. And they'll kill you for it. See you in hell.
We We interrupt this program to bring you a special report. We now go live to a statement from the President of the United States.
Okay, so the next sequence where we'll be looking at is the very famous Corto Maltese sequence. Here we've got the crazy president in either his hazmat suit, or in some of the people on my crew actually thought that he was in a spacesuit, so it's kind of funny. And we had a lot of heated debates about that. So then it goes to the scene where I like it because it's like this hard cut right to, here's the impending danger of the gigantic nuclear warhead. The actual animation of this scene is beautiful. I don't know whoever animated it, but it looks amazing when Superman catches it. It's actually one of my favorite shots of the film. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to go back and forth from like this impending doom that would basically end the world and go to Gordon. He's retired now. He just wants to stay retired and have a quiet life with Sarah. And now it's suddenly, the reality of all of these things coming to its fruition, of Joker's plan of starting World War III, the Soviets retaliating to the U.S., and Superman, as an agent of the United States has to, protect everyone. And here he is, moving the nuclear warhead up into space. And then it'll detonate, and this is going to set up the very kind of famous sequence where he's in the nuclear blast. And I wanted to make sure that the nuclear blast is what causes the EMP pulse, which will then cause Gotham and the eastern seaboard. I think actually most of the United States loses power, and here we've got some sequences where it all loses power. We go to this wide shot as Gotham kind of goes out. The sound design on the actual final animation is amazing. And then here we bring it back to what's happening with Batman, and now the power goes off, and we realize that, is he dead too? So in this sequence, one of the things we had to tackle for the Superman and the nuclear blast, it was really hard to try to convey like what Miller did, because I think it's one of the most kind of impactful pieces in the graphic novel of what he did. Like I remember it's zombie Superman, it looked amazing, and trying to translate that. And luckily I had my color stylist Bill Dunn. He bless his heart, because he knows color, and so he made sure that Lynn Varley's colors try to really translate through. So then we go to zombie Superman as he, touches the sunflower and gets rejuvenated by Mother Earth, or the rays of the sun that the plant life has basically sucked in. And then I even went with the idea of thinking, well, in part one I had the water be water. If you look at part one and part two, it's kind of a theme. Bruce's parents die in part one in the rain. It kind of the rain reminds him of his parents' death. When he comes back for the first time, it's like, in the comic, it's like baptism, with the rain on his chest. So I wanted to recall that in this footage with Superman, because we had Superman near death, and what we're seeing is that him rejuvenating from Mother Earth, and there's a shot, I think, of the sky as the rain starts to fall towards camera, and then one of the images that I wanted to do, because I remember Bruce, he was like, I have no idea what you're going to do about Superman, from zombie Superman to regular Superman. I pitched the idea like, hey, what if we just went to his back where it's all emaciated and his Superman S is all kind of crumpled, and then as the rain is hitting it and he's rejuvenating, both from sucking the sunlight from the plants as well as the, Mother Earth type of thing, where the rain is kind of, giving him a baptism, so to speak, and it's kind of that callback. And that's why we ended up doing that one last shot. And again, it's also a play on the shot that we saw with the introduction of Superman, where we ended on his Superman-ness. Okay, so the next sequence we'll be looking at is when basically Gotham has erupted into chaos. Everyone's looting. This crime is even more rampant than before because there's no power. And then to top it all off, the mutants have escaped.
One at a time.
Commissioner, we
So
got a problem.
the idea is that only some of the mutants from Part 1 became the Sons of the Batman. There's actually still a lot of, the worst of the worst who were still stuck in jail these last few months, and so now they've escaped. And what's going to happen is I'm going to have, this confrontation of the citizens who are basically, in for themselves, trying to survive in this world of no electricity and no law. And of course, the mutants who, in some respects, they want to enforce their own version of law, under their rule. And here you get the clash of, the common citizen versus, the kind of the organized group who wants to impose their own will, so to speak. And here's the clash, the big riot sequence where both armies do the big battle. Now this sequence was storyboarded by Gary Hartle, and God bless him, because a lot of this drawings I would not want him to do, because there's a lot of he tracked every single kind of person and made sure that we had kind of almost the comic, panel for panel. Here's our reveal of Batman as he comes in riding, leading the Sons of Batman on horseback, and there's Carrie Kelly. And there's a really cool sequence because it's like, it's literally what Batman is all about is, taking back your city, and how one man can make a difference is because Batman was able to rally, the Sons of the Batman, and now they're basically going to, not impose their will, but do what's best, for everyone, not just, like what the mutants wanted to do. So the next sequence here, this was storyboarded by Christina Soda, and it's funny, this is one of the scenes where Gordon has to go through and he sees the rampant looting, and I had her redo this sequence quite a few times, not because it was bad, it's just as a director you have to convey to your board artists and your designers and even your animators, like, what is the intention, like, why is this scene so important? And I wanted this to feel different from a different area than the looting. So if you notice, it's got this kind of heavy smoke filled, I sent a lot of clips from the movie Silent Hill so that so that when we cut back and forth, you have a very distinct look between the various parts of the city. And so I had to redo this because I wanted to add a lot of these shots of, like, everyone who's all out for themselves at the beginning, but then all it takes is one man. In this case, it's one man, Gordon, who rallies them and tells them, hey, we're a community. We're better than this. We can save our city if we want to. We don't need to rely on, other people. We can do it. Take back our city. And so, we went around and just threw out ideas of what would help do that, and we came up with this idea of him, helping them put out fires and buckets and everything. And so we cut back to Batman, who in some ways is almost mirroring exactly what Gordon had just done. But now he's doing it to, these looters and to these, the mutants, and he's basically telling them that, we need to band together. We need to, put our differences aside and work together if we're going to get through this, and it's really kind of inspiring how, everyone is reacting to him and kind of understanding what his message is about. And I think Peter Weller did a great job. I call this the Braveheart speech because it's the big rally, and I think he did a really good job with the dialogue. And it's kind of funny, like, when you read the comic, it's a certain cadence that you think that Batman is saying it, but when you actually read it out loud, it's kind of hard to actually sell that. And I think Peter did a great job of taking that dialogue that was in the comic and really making it work for what we needed.
I'm suing.
Good luck with that.
So here we have Yindel, where it's a callback to Part 1, where she kind of realizes what Gordon was trying to tell her during his whole Pearl Harbor speech, is that, Batman, he's too big. The idea that, once you've kind of, started the idea of how the fact that one man can make a difference and change. If he just has to make that choice, then it's infectious. It'll spread, and it's like wildfire, and you can't stop it. And that's what Yindel finally, kind of understands there. So this sequence, we're back to Gordon, and this is something that we kind of added later, and it's actually kind of Bruce's idea, so to speak. He wanted to have the firemen show up and kind of help them, mostly because we needed a way for Gordon to run back to his house to find, to his apartment building to find it in flames. And so we came up with this idea that, the firemen, they didn't just stop just because they ran out of power. They're running down the street with all of their supplies. And so we had to come up with this idea, like, how do I get Gordon to to wherever his wife is at? And so we came up with this idea that, he runs over, recognizing that this fire is spread, and it ends finally in this nice kind of embrace. And that is our closure to this whole sequence. Last but not least, we'll be looking at the Superman-Batman fight. This was actually, be my second favorite sequence of the movie. In the comic, I always, for me, it was always the Joker-Batman fight, which is always holds a special place in my heart. But this is actually, the Superman-Batman fight is actually one of those other things where most people will remember, oh, this is when Superman fought Batman, And, it's actually momentous, because I don't think it ever happened before in comics. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't remember it too much. Since then, we've had a lot of, animated versions of Superman fighting Batman, and so, now we're actually seeing the kind of origin of it, at least as far as I can remember, of Batman and Superman finally duking it out. So one of the things I want to talk about first is, first off, the sequence was storyboarded by Mel Zwyer, and Mel was actually, he was the one who initially did the design for Batman when we were still doing development that I really kind of liked. And John, who later took over for Mel, kind of, he refined it, but it was the initial piece that Mel kind of drew that actually inspired me to create this look that you're seeing for Batman and Superman for the whole Dark Knight Returns. And so when we got to part 2, I asked Mel, like, hey, can you do a sequence? He's like, what? And I'm like, and that's the thing about, if you know anything about animation or storyboarding, it's all about favors. And so I had to kind of like sweet talk and be like, hey, can you do this Superman end fight? Because, I'm so, at the time I was working closely with Sam Liu on the with the Batman Joker fight, that I needed somebody to just start this so that I can come in later and kind of talk him through kind of the beats that I want. Personally, I do a lot of live action kind of references. The one thing that my intention for parts 1 and 2 of The Dark Knight Returns was to make it feel as cinematic as possible. Even though it's animated and everybody thinks it's just a cartoon, to me it's more of an animated feature. Like I wanted, in my head, I wanted to feel like if this was on the movie theater, like this is what you would see, whether it's live action or animation. I wanted to direct it in such a way that it felt like it was, very cinematic. It had a feel and tone that was very reverent to the source material that Frank Mailer had. I think this is Lauren Montgomery who did this sequence. Lauren, again, if you're a big fan of the DC stuff, she directs a lot of our previous films, so I was able to convince her to do some stuff for me. And she's great at emotional stuff, so I wanted to give her all of these, like Alfred, all the touching acting moments, and she hit it out of the park. And this is a great scene where it's to emphasize the fact that they're on a timetable, but also Alfred kind of reminiscing, and also to set up the fact that Alfred is going to have a stroke soon, and that this is all coming to fruition. Everything is all ending, so to speak. We took a lot of the shots straight out of the comic, and other things we just decided, for the emotion, let's try to come up with as best that we can to kind of heighten the moment. So this is where I think Mel's sequence comes back, and he started, storyboarding out. And then when I was able to finally get off of the Joker Batman sequence, I went over his roughs and we kind of talked about different ideas. And one of the things that I wanted to do, and this is a little bit of trivia for our audience, is that if you noticed, if you're a fan of our DC works, you'll know that we've done homages to to this work a lot of times. For example. Batman Brave and the Bold, produced by James Tucker. Like, those guys did a sequence where Batman and Superman fight, and it's actually a fight where they used panels from The Dark Knight Returns, verbatim, as kind of stills, and it looked awesome. It looked really, really good. So, of course, that was done about a year before I got onto this project. So when we were initially talking about what we were going to do for this fight sequence, the first thing I said, I was like, okay, remember how it is in the comic? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, don't do that, because the audience has already seen it. And I told them what I want to do is I want to give a twist to this thing. So in a sense that if you notice, it's snowing, and what I wanted to do is I wanted to, I think I mentioned this earlier, is that I wanted to make water kind of a thematic theme that runs throughout the whole movie. So, at the beginning we have rain, and now if you notice, we have snow mixed with nuclear ash, kind of a precursor to the death of Batman, because it's wintertime, it's cold. So I wanted to make the weather be a part of the fight. So here we have a little bit of kind of an 80s feel. If you haven't noticed, I try to make the fight as 80s, or the whole movie is a very 80s-ish. So we have this kind of, cut to, random people in their apartment as, you have Batman, Superman just going to town on each other. And I kind of like it. There's a couple Easter eggs in there. If you freeze frame some of those scenes, you'll kind of see what I mean. But I hope you enjoy it, because, that's kind of stuff that I like to do, is for the fans who want to look at stuff. So this brings me to a good point here, where they're fighting inside this kind of construction yard. Originally, we had the scene just like you saw it, but I remember after we screened it to Bruce Timm, Bruce was like, why does Batman have superpowers? Why do you have super strength? And I'm like, well, I just figured his suit had it, And then Bruce is like, yeah, but he doesn't. And I'm like, what, is it just armor plating? Is that all he's got? Because I always thought in the comic that he's got, super strength, because he's punching Superman and everything, and wouldn't your hand break if you did it? So we talked back and forth what we can do, and then Bruce was thinking, hey, earlier there's a sequence where Batman is putting on his armor for the first time. What if we make him, as he's talking to Alfred, basically talking about the plan, what if we make him lift up, like the Batmobile, for example. So you'll actually see the 89 Batmobile. I had him lift that up. I think Bruce kind of looked at it and shook his head. He's like, wow, why did you use that? And I'm like, I kind of like it. And it fits in the story. It's 80s feel. So here's one of my favorite sequences. If you notice here, what I had Superman do is he punches Bruce into Crime Alley, right? And if you watch the first film, he falls, Bruce ends where his parents have died. And so when it cuts to his POV of Superman, as he's walking towards him, and you have that light flashing, that is actually the light that Joe Chill comes out of and kills his parents under. So I wanted to kind of, go full circle with that idea that, Batman, is about to die, and he actually ends up in the area where the birth of Batman, where his parents died. I originally wanted to cut in some shots of Joe Chill and that kind of just to remind the audience, in between those shots, and then cut to Bruce where he's kind of wide-eyed and then he kind of furrows his brow. At that point, I wanted to re-emphasize his post-traumatic syndrome that he has, and then have him just power through it. Unfortunately, that edit of what I wanted to do there will never see the light of day. But now that you're listening to this, you'll know that is where I intended kind of the flashbacks in there. And, you don't really notice it, but I would have liked it just to kind of a little bit add more emphasis to that moment. Okay, so here is the final sequence where Batman's plan, or Bruce's plan, to basically set up Superman to be in the right place at the right time, so that all he can fire his arrows all gonna come into fruition. So here, we have that POV arrow shot, very Sam Raimi-ish. I'm a big Sam Raimi fan, and here we've got Batman, standing triumphantly over Superman, who's as weak as a baby, so to speak, because Batman's saying like, so how does it feel, just to be like one of us. And this is the time. This is where really Bruce kind of goes to town on Superman, and it's kind of sad when you think about it, because he's beating up a guy who's kind of he's weak. There's no way to do it. But I like its point in the sense that I like what Bruce says is that, I was the one who beat you. I added this sequence here where he looks down at his chest. I think on the animatic, there's a more current animatic where what I did is I had him look down at his chest and I had him use his X-ray vision, and we see his heart kind of beating, but it has an irregular heartbeat. Because I wanted, again, like I mentioned earlier, is that in film you have to set things up. And the way I had it originally, where he just, he falls later with a heart attack, if it's not set up, the audience, I always felt it was a little empty. And so I wanted to add that just to kind of hint that his heart, there's something wrong with it. And I like this last shot where he holds up Batman. This is actually some of my storyboards because I really wanted him to be in profile just to kind of build up to this close-up where he's like, I'm the one who beat you. And then from there, you're thinking he's a triumphant, and then his eyes go wide, and then he clutches at his heart, and he drops dead. And it's this kind of poignant side moment where, if you think about it, like Superman doesn't really want to kill Batman. He's actually really trying to just bring him in. Maybe he's thinking that he can convince the president, like, hey, give him I'll make sure that he won't do this again. Because I really don't think Superman was trying to kill Batman. But I think Batman had a lot of pent-up anger in a sense that he's like, you know what, I always wanted to duke it out with Clark. Let me do this one last thing, even though he knew that it's all just kind of a ruse. And when Superman turns around and he's like, don't touch him, with all the officers coming, I think that's kind of fitting in the sense that it fits the fact that they were best friends, and it's just that they had different political views, or and it's because of that they had their differences, but they were still very, very close friends, and I wanted to make sure that still kind of came through, with the fight, as much as it's two guys just beating themselves up. I wanted to still keep Superman still likable in a way, like he still has a humanity about him, which I know a lot of people have their gripes about maybe the graphic novel, about how Superman was treated in it. And, I didn't think that when I first read the comic. Later, when I started working on it, I can see where that came from. So when we were, recording the voice, when Mark Valley was doing his performance for Superman, I really liked what he brought to it, because if you listen to the voice quality in his voice, you actually hear the regret, that Superman has, he's still trying to do his job and be, Boy Scout and work for the government, but you hear that kind of little bit of regret in his voice. Even the fact when he has to talk to Batman and tell him I gotta take you in, and it's best friends who suddenly are at odds, and both believes wholeheartedly with what they are trying to do. And it's just a matter of, it's a battle of wills at that point. If you think about it, they're both kind of right in what they do. Just Batman's a little bit cooler in doing it.